Before we get the show started, big announcement. EarthX 2025 tickets are now live. Join 4,000 other attendees, including prime ministers, ambassadors, UN associates, Fortune 500 CEOs, media personalities, all for 4 days of an amazing conference with panels, speakers, presentations, breakout rooms, calls to action, networking. Basically, I went there this past year and it was one of the best events I've ever been to. We will be hosting one full day of the event with a focus on the future of sustainability in business. If you're interested in speaking or sponsoring, contact me, Dylan Welch here. Still have a few speaking spots available. If you're not and you just want to attend and meet amazing people, get inspired, be sure to register today. Anyway, let's get this show started. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Green Podcast. I'm your host, Dylan Welch, and we have an awesome guest today, Grace Cordsen, Arctic researcher and polar specialist. So before we bring Grace on, I want to tell a kind of funny story. A couple of weeks ago, we were chatting on Zoom and Grace was like, I'm really surprised at how good my, internet connection is. I was like, oh, why is that? She's like, oh, well, I'm in the Arctic North Pole right now. And I'm like, really? And so she takes her laptop, turns it out the window, and there's just ocean and ice as far as I can see. And I'm like, all right, Grace, that's super badass. So we follow each other on Instagram. The next day, Grace is just out at the North Pole running a half marathon. And I'm like, all right, now you're officially the coolest person I know. So she is amazing, doing really cool things. I'm excited to talk to her, share a little bit more about what she's working on and how you can get involved and support her. So Grace, first off, thanks for being here, joining us from, where are you right now?
I'm in Reykjavik, so I just got off that ship which I was on a few weeks ago that was higher in the Arctic, but now I'm hanging out in Iceland.
So tell us a little bit just about what you've been doing the past couple weeks.
Yeah, so I just got, like I said, just got off a ship that started out of Svalbard, which is the Arctic island above Norway, and then went to the North Pole and then down the east coast of Greenland and then ended yesterday in Reykjavik. And it was a passenger vessel, but I was on board as a researcher doing both research work that was focusing on the visual record of the Arctic, so actually looking at the art historical record and kind of what scientists and explorers have created throughout history in terms of what we see and how we interpret the Arctic. And I was specifically looking at the way in which we can see perceptual shifts and climate change represented in this art and visual record. So there was that research component to what I was doing, as well as just general journalism, all on behalf of the Arctic Research Foundation.
That's so cool. So tell us, like, what's the day-to-day life like on this Arctic research ship? Like, you wake up, then what happens?
Well, honestly, since like really the goal of the trip was to get to the North Pole, or at least that was like the original, like thing that had to be checked off. And because of that, the first few days you're just kind of on the ship. You don't really get off, you're just going straight towards the pole. And those first took us about 4 days to get to the pole. Yeah, I was just on board. I was researching kind of the places we were going to because I was starting to learn more about what the itinerary was going to look like. And then also interviewing a bunch of the scientific researchers that we had on board.
That's awesome. So bring us sort of like way back. Like, how did you very first get into doing this research, doing the journalism, and how did you become this Arctic specialist?
Yeah, so I have so much thanks to send to one particular program, which is called the Young Explorers Program. I was a member of it in 2018 when I was in college, and this program is a collaboration between Adventure Canada and the Explorers Club. And what it is every year they take somewhere between I think two or three different people between the ages of 18 and 29 aboard one of Adventure Canada's, which is an Arctic expedition travel company. One of their trips to the Arctic or general region, the one I actually went on was to the North Atlantic Ocean, so not quite the Arctic. And when you're on board, you are conducting a research project of your choosing, or you proposed and then was chosen. And when I did that in college, it was a cultural piece looking actually at food heritage, but I was taking this art historical lens, which is really how I think of the way I write and the way I interpret kind of, or what I specialize in is really kind of taking an art historical approach to not only journalism generally, but the history of the place I'm going to.
That is awesome. So then how did you basically transition from that into what you currently do as a researcher and journalist?
So from there, I definitely caught the bug for being not only just generally in remote places, but specifically for the Arctic, and then what would then become the Antarctic as well. So from there, I knew I had this passion, or at least this like piqued interest for exploring the polar regions. And then once I graduated, I serendipitously got a job working on an Antarctic ship, not in research, but in kind of overall guest experience and passenger service. And that's what put me in the Antarctic for the first time. And from there, I was like truly hooked on trying to learn as much about the polar regions as possible and also to protect them. Because once you're there, it's like you're just so immersed in this incredible place. And the presence of the changing climate and all of that is so palpable
Mhm.
that you not only want to continue to go back, but you want to continue to protect it. And so I just got absolutely hooked from there on going back and back and continued to work for multiple companies in both polar regions.
Yeah, I remember I went down to Patagonia, like the very southern tip, not quite Antarctica, but seeing just some of the glaciers at, in Argentina was so mind-blowing. And you just, that's something you don't typically see day to day, something that big, that grand. It's almost hard for your
Totally.
brain to like comprehend it. And you're like, damn, I forget this is even out there and exists. Like we really do have to do things to protect these things. It doesn't really mean anything when it's like the glaciers are melting. It's like, all right, well, that doesn't affect me. But then you go see them in person, or you see like before and after pictures of, 20 years ago and today. It really is such an eye-opening experience. So I can only imagine that plus down in Antarctica or up in the Arctic.
And that's an amazing example of the kind of visual history in which I was looking at, where it's glaciers are, almost the easiest example to show this kind of climate change in a visual way throughout time, because not only have I seen with my own eyes from the first time I went to East or West Greenland to last year when I went to West Greenland, I've seen the same glacier recede year after year, but I've also dug into the visual record and seen what it looked like 30 years ago, 40 years ago. And it's insane how much these places look like they just look completely different. It's a different place.
Yeah. So, I mean, you're probably one of the very few in your circle is probably normal, but like you're for the general average person, you're one of the few people I know that's ever been to Antarctica and the Arctic. So what, if you can share to someone who's never been, like, what are some of your biggest takeaways from the experiences you've had and of going there?
Ooh, that's a good question. Well, I think I first want to preface it where the Arctic and the Antarctic are very different places. And there's a million different takeaways that I could say for both of them, but I maybe I'll separate them because I think it's important to understand them as wholly different. And the most important difference that is happening, or that between the two, is that the Arctic is a land rooted in culture. It is a land that has a human history. And so you very much, I think, when going to the Arctic, should put a priority on understanding culture and respecting the cultures that live there and learning about the human element to the place you're going to beyond just like the epic nature and the polar bears and the ice. Like there's this wholly human part of the Arctic that is super important to going there. Versus the Antarctic doesn't have a human history beyond just science bases and research and exploration and that kind of thing. And because of that, I think the Antarctic can feel a little bit like more of your own, or like the land of everyone, And so you go and you're like, oh my gosh, it's untouched. Like it's just raw nature. Not that you don't feel that way in the Arctic, but the Antarctic has this kind of otherworldliness to it because of that.
Makes sense. No, that's really cool perspective. I never would have thought about that and never have thought about that in that way. How did you get your job working? You said kind of the guest relations and the Antarctica trip. How did you get that job?
Well, the thing with the polar industry is that, and with like any industry, but particularly with this one, is like once you're like got your foot in the door and you have some friends that can start to refer you, like it's totally the kind of thing where you're like you have to have a friend or someone you know at a company be like, hey, she's great, or he's great, or whatever, and then you can like start applying, and it's like it's simply that way because we're always working on very small teams in very close quarters, really long days. Like people aren't going to hire you unless that you can kind of be vouched for.
Mhm.
And so I got that first job through a friend that I had met through at the first company I ever worked for in the Arctic. She also worked the Antarctic season and she recommended me for that company. And so then from there, I kind of now, like you said, it's so normal for me to know people in all the in polar regions and at all the different companies because it's just that's like the world that I interact with.
So cool. So now, before we started recording, you kind of mentioned you have another second kind of research trip happening. So you just finished one. Now you've got a couple days to relax in Iceland, and then you've got another one coming up. Tell us a little bit about that one.
Yeah, well, actually, it's relevant to how I got started. So the company that I got the grant from, the Young Explorers program, what would have been 6 years, 6 or 7 years ago, I still work for them. After being a young explorer for them, I came on board and now I'm their program director. So I lead their educational programming on board and kind of build out like how these guests will learn about the Arctic throughout their time there. And actually, recently, I'm stepping into more of a role that will hopefully educate people more specifically on climate in the Arctic and being at least the climate coordinator in terms of climate education on board as well. So I'm going back to the company's called Adventure Canada. I'm going to meet the ship in Kangerlussuaq, Greenland in 2 days, 3 days, and it'll be a fun one. I'm excited for it.
Yeah. Are these expeditions and trips, are they constantly going back and forth, or is it like a once a month or once a quarter or once a year thing? Like, how does that typically work?
So it's honestly more of just there. I think the best way to answer it is just like it's a ship that's kind of following a set itinerary. So, like for example, the company I'm about to go to, Adventure Canada, they charter this ship from, I think they start their season in May, and the ship starts from Newfoundland in Canada and then slowly makes its way up through Arctic Canada and then over to Greenland and then ends in Iceland at the end of the season. And that's where they do most of their trips. And then that same ship is chartered by a different company in the opposite season and then goes down to Antarctica and does usually the Antarctic Peninsula, but other companies may go to other regions or other areas of the Antarctic based off the ship's capability and that kind of thing.
Nice. Okay, that makes sense. So, what's in store for the future? Like, where do you see your trajectory going? More the journalist route, the explorer route? Do you want to stay in the polar regions? Do you want to go start exploring somewhere new? Or are you just like, wherever this life takes me, I'm gonna go?
Now, I'm a little more intentional than just riding the wave, as much as I do love to see what just comes my way, because sometimes that really does work. But what I have coming up is something I'm really excited for, and that's actually I'm going back to school in the fall. I'm getting my master's in sustainability management at Columbia, so I'll be based out of New York, which is home for me. I'm really excited to move back. And the reason I'm doing that is that while I do love kind of living this almost nomadic lifestyle, pole to pole, just going all the to both the polar regions all the time, I do really want the foundation of a really solid climate education, specifically in how I can impact things or impact businesses and potentially make them more sustainable. And I would love to apply the learnings that I will gain to the polar regions because as as someone who deeply loves the polar regions, I know that expedition travel and travel to them is fraught with a lot of different complications and implications when it comes to the climate. And I don't think it's going to stop. I don't think that industry is going anywhere. So we might as well work to making it more and more sustainable. And hopefully I can apply what I'm going to be learning in school to make it more sustainable and continue to educate people in the polar regions, because people will always be curious to see what they are like.
Very cool. Well, congrats on that. Good for you. I love hearing, the furthering your education, furthering your career with the goal of helping companies be more sustainable. As we kind of wrap things up, do you have like one sort of story you like to share, or one event that kind of sticks out in your mind to just like this encapsulates like what it's like to be in the Arctic or the Antarctica or the polar region that you could share with us? I'm sure you
Ooh,
have a lot, so I know it's a tough
I
question. I'm
do.
putting you on the spot
I
right
know. I'm gonna, okay. Gosh, it's such a good question. And I should have, obviously, knowing I was going on a podcast, prepared some specific examples. But okay, two things pop into my mind. One, which I won't really focus on, but I think is worth noting, is that what truly pops into my mind are like the people I work with and some of like the amazing teammates with whom I've experienced those regions with. But to you guys, that doesn't represent the Arctic or the Antarctic, but to me, it's actually more about like the
now.
teams that I've worked with, because like I've basically made some of my best friends through working on these tiny teams in close quarters with them. But in terms of a specific place, I emotionally don't think I'll ever experience, or I wish I could experience going to specifically South Georgia for the first time, which isn't, it's on your way to the Antarctic. South Georgia Island is one of the most remote islands in the world. It's where the king penguins are.
Mhm.
If that rings a bell, they're taller penguins than the brush-tailed penguins of the peninsula. And when I first got there and stepped off this ship, which I had been on for almost 10 days, I think, without, stepping foot on land, and then you get to this incredibly remote place. And it was the first season I had ever worked in Antarctica, and you just step onto ground and you're suddenly faced with mountains like the Alps meeting kind of pasture lands filled with penguins up to your waist, that are that tall, that meet a rocky ocean. And I just started crying. Like I couldn't, and I'm not a crier, which is so much why I want to tell the story, because it's just like I never react that way. And it was so beautiful and overwhelming. And it was truly a feeling of like, how am I this lucky
Mhm.
to be able to do this? And like I'm being paid to do this and be here and take people here and show them these wonders of the world. Like I can't even believe it.
That's awesome. It is amazing, and like to have that experience of just sort of the raw natural beauty, seeing that it literally drives you to tears. Like that's something that every person should feel multiple times throughout their lives. And that's really the power of like going to new places, exploring, stepping out of your comfort zone. That's a place I've always wanted to go to as well. South Georgia Islands. Isn't that the very last stop on Shackleton's like crazy
Yeah.
trip
So
back
in
from getting shipwrecked?
Precisely. So when the Endurance gets crushed in the Weddell Sea, just to the right of the Antarctic Peninsula, Shackleton and his men make their way up to basically the tippy top island of the peninsula, set up camp, and they're like, you know what? We have to, and the island's called Elephant Island. From Elephant Island, they're like, we have to send it.
Yeah.
We have to send it to South Georgia. And they take their little rowboat, the James Caird, and they row the last, I think it's like 600 nautical miles. It's like actually insane, to South Georgia, where they like, yeah, are eventually find, a whaling station and are rescued. But yeah, you're right.
That's so cool. Whenever I'm like tired and don't want to go to the gym, I'll like think about those guys doing that trip from
Oh
El,
my God, yeah.
and I'm like, all right, I guess I could go work out for an hour. That's, and then like I went down a crazy rabbit hole after like reading that book, and actually was just looking at like South Georgia Islands the other day. So cool, that we were able to talk. It's amazing the stuff you're doing. Also, I believe we'll both be in New York for New York City Climate Week, so hopefully we can grab a coffee there. Uh,
Definitely.
to our listeners, if you're not able to go to New York City Climate Week, I'm going to be hosting a live webinar where basically after the week, I'm going to kind of share my insights, my thoughts, interview some people, kind of key takeaways that I've learned that you can just keep an eye out for. So maybe we'll have Grace back there. Hopefully Grace will be a speaker at our EarthX 2025 event coming up. We're still hashing out the details. But other than that, how can we like support you, Grace? Or, what's a good call to action that we can give our audience to go out and make some magic happen?
Okay, well, selfishly, you can follow me on Instagram at Amazing Grace C, the letter C at the end. But in terms of the polar regions, you can go learn about them. And from there are so many amazing causes and places to support when it comes to the polar regions. And I would just first off empower people to go learn about them, learn about how in which or how our climate is changing them, and how you can basically support in multiple ways.
Awesome. Follow Grace, support the causes. As always, thank you guys for tuning in to the Green Podcast. Our goal with this show, green.org, is to just share cool things happening in business, tech, finance, sustainability, bring on cool leaders, explorers, travelers, CEOs doing cool stuff. So very excited to have Grace here. Grace, thank you for joining us today. And we'll have to have you back on. And we're really only scratching the surface of all the cool things you've done.
Yeah, would love to chat.
All right. Thanks, guys. Have a great rest of your day. See you soon. And hopefully we'll see you at EarthX 2025. Bye. Thank you so much for tuning into the episode. My name is Dylan Welch. Appreciate it. As always, stay up to date with the latest information on green.org and dylanwelch.com. Dylan Welch Media is a full-service media and communications agency dedicated to promoting, marketing, and helping businesses in clean tech, renewable energy, and sustainability grow, get more clients, get more customers, get in front of their ideal clientele. If you have any more questions, feel free to reach out. If you're interested in joining the Green Summit, go to www.green-summit.org. Reserve your ticket today. There's very few spots left, so make sure you get on that ASAP. Thank you and have a great rest of your day.